בצלם עצמותו, ונושא כל בדברו, רב הגבורה, לאחר שעשה טיהור חטאים, ישב לימין הגדולה.
In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets at many times in various ways. But now, in the end of days, he has spoken to us by the Messiah, his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory, and the flawless manifestation of his reality. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he made atonement for sins, he sat down in the place of authority beside the Majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
What he began, he awaits the culmination of. We too anticipate that culmination as we respond in gratitude, but also in anticipation with Ohr Chadash, pages 156 and 157. As we extend our gratitude to our God, but also our expectation that he will bring Messiah soon, as we understand it, bring him back soon.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה.
Amen.
והעמד יברח ירותי, וימלך מלכותי ויצמח פור פני ויקרב משיחי. וחייכונו וימיכונו וחיי דכל בית ישראל. ויגלו בזמן קריב אמרו.
Amen. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם לעולם מחמיה יתברך.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם לעולם מחמיה יתברך. וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל. שמי דקודשא בריחו. לאלה מן כל ברכתה, וישרתה תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה ואמרו
Amen.
יהי שלום הרבה משמיה, וחיים טובים עלינו, ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרמיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, ועל כל ישראל ואמרו
Amen.
Glorified and sanctified be his great name in the world, which is created according to his will. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom, and cause his salvation to sprout, and bring near his Messiah in your lifetime and in your days, and in the life of all the house of Israel, speedily, yes, soon. And let us say,
Amen.
May his great name be blessed forever and forever, eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, adored and lauded be the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he, who is high above, far above all blessings and hymns, and praises and consolations which are spoken in the world, and say, Amen. May there be great peace from heaven and good life for us and for all Israel, and say,
Amen.
He who makes peace in the heavenly realms, may he make peace for us and for all Israel, and let us all say,
Amen.
Our Tehillah Habrit Chadashah portion this evening is pages 1536 and 1537 in your pew Bibles, the gold ones. we've entered the throne room seen through Elohim Asher, we are still there as we respond with Tehillat Ohr Chadash, as we begin to take in the awesomeness of the one who's at the center of that throne room scene, at whose right hand the Messiah himself sits. That text begins, and just as a reminder, you get the parts that are indented. I get the parts that come all the way out to the margin. Now, just to be very clear, there are some paragraph indentations. I get those as well.
Gets all the good stuff.
The text begins, "Ukregah hayiti v'ruach v'chinei kisei nira, v'shamayim v'echad yoshev al ha'kisei." And the text says, I was there in heaven. Before me stood a throne, and on the throne someone was sitting. The one sitting there gleamed like diamonds and rubies, and a rainbow shining like emerald encircled that throne. Surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and on the throne sat 24 elders. From the throne came forth lightnings, voices, and thunderings. Quick pause. That sounds an awful lot like our reading for tonight, our parashah. Back to the text. And before the throne were 7 flaming torches. In front of the throne was a sea of glass, clear as crystal. In the center, around the throne, were 4 living beings. I'm now on verse 8. Each of the 4 living beings had 6 wings, and day and night they never stopped saying,
Holy, holy, holy is Adonai, God of heaven's armies, the one who was, who is, and who is coming.
And whenever the living beings give glory, honor, and thanks to the one sitting on the throne, to the one who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before the one sitting on the throne, the one who lives forever and ever, and they worship him. They throw their crowns in front of the throne, and they say,
You are worthy, Adonai Eloheinu, to have glory, honor, and power, because you have created all things. Yes, because of your will they were created and came into being.
The scene is set as we are in that throne room scene. It's now time for us to stand before the one who's the king, whom we've now expressed our praise and gratitude to. We face Jerusalem, the direction of the ark, as we respond with paragraphs 1 through 3 of the Amidah. We're reminded that God will once again send a liberator to his children for the sake of his name. It'll be that at that time that the dead will rise, paragraph 2. But in the meantime, we have the opportunity of being in his presence as we stand before him and utilize these paragraphs to express our response of gratitude. Pages 66 to 71, paragraphs 1 through 3. Mikamoka al Givurot. Who is like you, Lord of might? Who can be compared to you, O King? Which is why we sanctify your name in the world, as they sanctify it in the highest heavens. As it is written by your prophet, they call out to each other, and they say,
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. All the earth is full of his splendor.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzavaot Melech haaretz kevodo.
Then comes back that resounding response.
Praise, praise be the splendor of the Lord everywhere it is manifested.
Baruch kavod Adonai, mim kamo.
And in the holy writings we are further told,
The Lord shall reign forever, your God, O Zion, for all generations.
Yimloch Adonai leolam, Elohayik Tzion lador v'dor, hallelujah.
so in every generation we will tell of your greatness, and in every age we will proclaim your holiness. Your praise will certainly never depart from our lips, for you are a great and holy God and King. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. You are a great and holy God and King. And it's as our King that we now stand before him, and we pledge to him, we affirm that he is our King, and we will follow him fully, wholeheartedly. That's the purpose of the Shema, pages 34 to 39.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vayed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, B'chol levacha, u'b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol me'odecha. Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, Asher Elohim esaka hayom ha'levavecha. V'shinantam levavecha, v'divartam, v'shivtacha v'betecha, u'v'lechtecha b'derech. Ushapecha u'vikumecha, ushatam leota ledecha, ve'hayu letotafot be'ineinecha, u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'visharecha. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates.
As we take in the various sections with which we responded this evening, we come to the conclusion found on pages 88 and 89. Ein kamocha, truly there is none like you, O Lord among the gods.
Ein chamocha Elohim Adonai, v'ein kamasecha. Malchucha malchut kol amim, u'memshaltcha b'kol dor, b'kol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai Eloh leolam va'ed. Adonai hosts le'lo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds.
Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
The Lord shall reign. That's the theme that is picked up by Vaya Ibn So on pages 88 and 89. It's at that time when he reigns that the text will come true, that from Zion will go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem.
ויהי בן אהרון ויאמר משה קום אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך
כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ולבוא אדוני מירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, לעמו ישראל בקדושתו.
And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel.
In the Parsha for tonight, we have the text where he gave to us the Torah, a tremendous treasure which we need to treasure and to which we respond. And we respond on page 133 plus the insert.
The ark now unveils its treasure.
To our eyes and minds and hearts.
Inside, the scroll of Torah stands.
It stands there with all its richness and wisdom.
As we listen, voices speak, voices of our ancestors.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, and Moses.
O God, they bring us your instructions for us.
Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Miriam speak to us as well.
O God, they move us to respond to your promises to us.
We are grateful for your words, the words of Torah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord calls.
We will hear your words that we may learn them, love them, live them.
What does the Lord require of you? To fear him, love him, serve him, and walk in all his ways.
All the Lord has said, we will do.
The Torah of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The teaching of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple.
The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes.
Happy is the one that walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful.
But our
Delight is in the Torah of the Lord, and in his Torah we will meditate day and night.
We shall be like a tree planted by streams of waters, that brings forth its fruit in its season,
and whose leaf does not wither, and whatever we do, we shall prosper.
A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you.
For my ordinances which I
Command you are not too difficult for you, neither are they far off.
Do we make the Torah void through faith? Not at all. We establish Torah.
So then the Torah is holy, and the commandment is holy, just, and good.
That the righteous requirements of Torah might be fully met in us, who do not living according to our evil inclinations, but according to the Ruach Hashem.
The day will come when my Torah will flow from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.
Mishabarach Avotenu Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Rabbi John. May he bless Celia. May he bless Connie. May he bless Virginia, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch hu et Adonai Mavorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is blessed.
Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
It always takes a little longer to find the text in question if I didn't have the afternoon to hunt it up in advance, which is why I find it so quickly at other times. Don't tell anybody to see. Hold on. Inside bulletin, you follow along as I chant. I still hear pages turning. I shouldn't hear many pages turning. It's the length of that bulletin. Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midyan Chotein Moshe et kol asher asa Elohim Lemoshe ul Yisrael Amo. And Jethro, priest of Midian, father-in-law of Moses, that dude, all of that comes after the verb, which we now get to finally. He heard all which the Lord had done for Moses and for Israel, his people. You may be seated. And what he heard about was an awful lot and truly amazing and miraculous stuff. I'll reflect on that briefly with you shortly. But it's just a reminder of what God has done. And right in the middle of all that, then God shows up on the mountain. And what a scene. Pay careful attention. Put yourself in that scene as it is read to you.
Exodus 19, 16 through 20. On the morning of the third day, there was thunder, lightning, and a thick cloud on the mountain. Then a shofar blast sounded so loudly that all the people in the camp trembled. Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. They stood near the base of the mountain because Mount Sinai was enveloped in smoke because Adonai descended onto it in fire. Its smoke went up like the smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain shook violently. As the sound of the shofar grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him with a voice. Adonai came down onto Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain. Then Adonai called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moshe went up.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet V'chaye olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the Torah of light, of truth and life everlasting, planted in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
As you clearly heard from the reading, he truly did give us the Torah in an amazing fashion. And as our ancestors stood there at the mountain in our text, so we now, in a sense, stand in that mountain scene as well as we rise, and we respond with Vazot HaTorah. These are truly the words that you gave to us directly through the hand of Moses. Pages 98 and 99 for Vazot HaTorah. Transliteration is page 95. If you'll wait just a minute, we will turn exactly to those words that came from the mountain.
Bezot
HaTorah asher sam Moshe לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד Moshe. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel, and is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated.
Exodus 17, 8 through 13. When Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim, Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us, go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with God's staff in my hand. Joshua did as Moses had told him and fought with Amalek. Then Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. When Moses raised his hand, Israel prevailed, but when he let it down, Amalek prevailed. However, Moshe's hand grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, the one on the side and one side and the other on the other, so that his hands stayed steady until sunset. Thus Joshua defeated Amalek, putting their people to the sword.
When God speaks, things happen, but they only happen if we allow them to happen in our lives. Oh, we need to have a blessing afterward. No, we don't. Not for that one. Sorry. It sounded like a parsha portion, so don't mind me. My mind's still in New York. And those words that he speaks are intended to root themselves deeply in our lives, which is what we acknowledge as we now respond with Etz Chaim, a tree of life. And we ask, renew our days as of old.
Etz Chaim
למחזיקים בה בתום כהה מאושר דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו חדש ימינו כקדם. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו חדש ימינו
A tree of
life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
With our days renewed as of old, we're better prepared to stand as his priests in his presence. And so we, in fact, do that, stand as his priests in his presence, as we respond with pages 98 and 99.
ובנוכו יאמר שובה, אדוני רבבות אלפי Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness.
May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah.
בעבור דוד עבדך, אל תשב פני משכחה. כי לקחתו נתתי לכם, תורתי אל תעזבו. I give you good instruction, do not forsake my Torah.
Please greet those in your section as we greet one another up here. Thank you. Okay, enough fun. I think Shabbat School has excused themselves already. Well, it seems this. They just lived through one of the most amazing experiences imaginable. In fact, it was one of the most amazing experiences anyone could imagine. The crowds were still buzzing with excitement. Everyone was talking about it with his or her neighbor. Did you see that? I just couldn't believe my eyes. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. And then just as suddenly, the happy chatter was stilled by an eerie hush. A death-like blanket of silence had extinguished the excitement. It was as if they had run into a wall. There was no way around it or over it. They were stuck. Hope drowned in fear. And their fear was that they would literally drown. The Israelites had left Egypt in a rush of excitement. They had experienced the thrill of being rescued from a hopeless situation. They had lived through supernatural things that were quite literally unheard of. In fact, Deuteronomy chapter 4 says exactly that. Miracles such as these had never occurred in all of history. They were unknown in the universe. And they were free at last. After over 400 years, they were free. But it seemed that no sooner than they had started out, they found themselves with the sea in front of them and Pharaoh's chariots behind them. They had no place to go, no way of escape. It was the end of the line. But as it turned out, It was really just the beginning of their journey, a wonderful walk with God through the wilderness. One of the more or less ancient rabbis reflected on this situation they were about to enter in the following way. One reason for God's decision to lead them through the desert is that God wanted them to be in circumstances where they would have to experience constant miracles in order to survive. This would be their schooling in faith, for they would see through the manna, the water, the quail, the constant protection from the elements, and so on. They would see that God was truly with them and powerfully active for them. In other words, he was really the God who spoke at the burning bush and shared that name with them in reality, and then some. As a result, for the rest of our national history, we could look back and know that everything is in God's hands. Quick pause. We didn't do it in the Amidah selection for this evening, but we frequently do it. Paragraph 6 reminds us that we are in his keeping because his miracles are with us, evening, morn, and noon. Back to the rabbi. And this is a lesson that is clearest. This is a lesson that is clearest in a desert where human survival, especially for a nation of millions, would have been impossible without divine intervention. End quote. And so, the journey had begun. Now, as Jews worldwide work our way through the weekly Parsha, we often note that there is a journey that's unfolding in these texts. And by these texts, I'm not talking about the Parsha tonight, but I'm talking about the Parsha from last week. That's to let those of you who weren't here last week get caught up on last week's Parsha. But as you well know me by now, I'm often at least a week behind. So there it is. And in fact, nowhere is this idea of that journey that's unfolding more prominent in last week's Parsha, Beshalach. After the amazing events that led the people to freedom, the newly liberated Israel moves on into the desert. And these chapters from last week highlight some of the experiences of the people, as well as their varied responses. Hopefully I got the Talib clip away from the microphone. It's getting annoying for me. I don't know about for you. Anyhow, the Parsha from last week highlights some of the experiences of the people and their varied responses along that very journey. And the first stop of the journey is on the other side of the sea called, as Dr. Patrice mentioned last week, Yam Suf. After about Sea of Reeds, in case you forgot. After over 400 years of physical oppression, the people are led to freedom by Moses. It wasn't easy, to be sure. Ultimately, God had unleashed 10 miraculous signs on the land of Egypt and on its gods to convince a very stubborn Pharaoh to let the people go. The last plague, the striking of the firstborn, is emphasized every year, of course, at Passover, at Pesach. By the way, please remember in this setting that Pharaoh was a firstborn. And when he saw the firstborn go down, you can imagine that he might have been thinking that he was next. That might have hurried his response. Oh, by the way, however, remember Pharaoh needed 2 more miracles to complete his personal 12-step program. The pillar of cloud and the sea of reeds experience. Yet the Passover experience illustrates another religious reality of redemption or liberation as well. As noted by an ancient rabbi, we have been freed from spiritual slavery to a life of liberation from self and from sin in the Messiah. You find that in Romans chapter 6, and it's set up in such a way as if it appears that the rabbi who was saying these things was thinking about them during the practice of laying tefillin, because that's a reminder that we are set free, but we are set free to serve. Anyhow, the Passover Haggadah also reminds us we were once slaves to Pharaoh, but now we are free. Note that the first action after the liberation of our people, and we noted this last week, is that they joined together in a grand song, the Song at the Sea, which was part of the Parsha, but also part of our service last week. The song, a great song to Adonai, to our Lord. It is a wonderful section of the Torah filled with praise and with thanksgiving to our God. Not only with enthusiastic voices, but also with instrumentation, which is why we like to throw in some instrumentation here. We don't really throw it in. It's very well performed. But anyhow. This teaches us, I'm going to suggest, an important truth. The first stop on the journey of freedom is or should be gratitude, worship. This was clear to that generation of Israel who came from the sea. And on reflection, it should be clear to us as well, from our own personal experience. When we came to the realization of Yeshua and his work of liberation on our behalf, we probably responded with gratitude and with worship. The Torah became more precious to us, or it should have. The liturgy became more alive, or it should have. The traditions became more meaningful, or they should have. And if they didn't, or if it doesn't feel quite as enthusiastic as before, then look in the last several pages of the Siddur under the section that says Kavanah. That's the key to it staying alive and vital in our daily experience. Well, not daily, in our weekly experience on Shabbat, as well as our daily experience with God. Well, the second stop on the journey, on the adventure, in the Parsha from last week, is the infamous place called Marah, so named because its waters were bitter. And here we have a striking contrast to the happy service at the sea. After 3 days in the wilderness, the same people were now very thirsty and were complaining about the lack of drinkable water. The shift in tone is remarkable. But we can't really fault the people for questioning. This, too, I'm going to suggest, many of us can relate to. It's much like the contrast many times between the sweetness of a Shabbat service and the tedious Tuesday afternoon at the office. How easily our gratitude can turn to grumbling, and we turn from one of the seven dwarfs to another, from happy to grumpy. Now, it's not always easy to figure out what's happening around us, but in the case of Marah, it should be noted very carefully that Moses, the text says, led Israel to this desolate place. Moses led them there. In other words, God was himself leading the people from the thrill of freedom to a place of testing and of learning. Please remember that it is a theme of Scripture that true followers of the Messiah will certainly find their faith tested at various stages of their journey or our journey with God. And it would be nice, I think all of us would agree, it would be nice if we could instantly or constantly reside in, as Israel found it, the land of milk and honey. But the reality is that we are in a wilderness that will constantly test the durability and the reality and the practicality of our faith. Again, the rabbi summarizes this pointedly in the previous chapter of Romans. We can take heart in our tribulations, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance, proven character, and proven character, confident hope. Now, while it can sometimes be confusing to us, we should not be surprised that testing is a central part of the Messianic faith journey. It certainly was at the very beginning of the Jewish journey with Abraham. You remember some of his tests, including the rather stark one of the attempted sacrifice of Isaac. But testing, if we understand it correctly, is actually a sign of God's love for us, in that he gets to smooth out some of our rough edges and to draw us closer to him. The third stop in this journey from last week's Parsha is a wonderful place of refreshment and of encouragement. The Torah describes it in one majestic verse. It simply says, chapter 15, verse 27, and they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped by the waters. So all the people were rejuvenated. I could have said refreshed, but I did say rejuvenated. Okay, thank you. So all the people were rejuvenated after a tough time of questioning and testing. You see, our adventures with Messiah have their times of joy, but also various times find us camped by Marah. Yet, as we stand firm in our faith in Yeshua, there's always a place called Elim, it seems, around the corner. Remember that generation was refreshed, yet it was still in the wilderness. So too with our adventure with God. Which brings us to their next stop, and in effect our next stop as well. As it was read to you this evening, the Israelites are suddenly attacked from behind by the Amalekites, Amalek. So Moses appoints Joshua to lead the Israelite fighters while he stands on that nearby hill with the rod of the Lord in his hand. And as long as Moses can hold up his hand, the Israelites prevail. Please remember what that rod was last used for when it was held up. The sea parted. Same rod. But when he lets that rod down, Amalek prevails. So, Aaron, it's often pronounced her. Maybe I'll just pronounce it Hur, because then you won't know if I'm speaking about her or him. Anyhow, so Aaron and Hur hurry alongside Moses to hold up his hands. And so Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword, the text says. But in this story, it leaves us with a question. Who is the hero of this story? On one level, the text itself answers that question because Moses builds an altar and names it Adonai Nissi, the Lord my banner, or the Lord my victory, which is telling us how he has again fulfilled not only his promise, but the name he emphasized at that burning bush scene, the promise to go with them and to work for them. So God wins the victory over Amalek. And in the broader battle as well, the Lord himself is the hero. Through the death and resurrection of the Messiah, he has gained the victory, the ultimate victory, against all forces that would oppose him and his purposes. For his people Israel. He's gained victory once again. But human beings, if you heard the story carefully, that's an interesting phrase I just came up with. I'll stick with it. If you heard the story carefully, human beings still have a vital role in carrying out or enacting this victory. As in the battle with Amalek, so I'm going to suggest we can still ask on the human level, who is the hero? Well, to the Israelite troops on the ground, undoubtedly, it was Joshua who appears as the hero. But let me suggest Joshua had a different perspective. This brave young leader who leads them in the victory against Amalek. Well, from his perspective, especially because he sensed the battle's ups and downs, though ending in decisive victory, from his perspective, Moses must appear to be the hero. Joshua knows that Moses is on the hill behind him, so to speak, with the staff of God. And when he raises his hand, the Israelites are victorious. Surely everything hinges on Moses. But please remember, Moses couldn't keep his hands lifted up for any length of time without the support of Aaron and Hur. So, perhaps they are heroes. Now, Aaron, of course, had played a heroic role in the Exodus, seen as the brother and spokesman for Moses. But who is Hur? Like Joshua, he makes his first appearance in the story. But unlike Joshua, he soon leaves the stage. One more time, he appears with Aaron to assist him in leading the Israelites while Moses ascends Mount Sinai. That's next week's Parsha. Then he is not mentioned again except as the grandfather of Bezalel, the master artisan who constructs the tabernacle. In other words, Hur is an ordinary person who is probably too old to go into battle with Joshua. He sees Moses and Aaron walking up the hill and follows them to see if he can be of any help. And sure enough, Moses needs a person on each side to support his hands so that he can keep them raised until Israel wins the victory. So Aaron takes one side, Hur is on the other, thus becoming a hero. Now, if you look at the story, you might object. Well, look, that's not so heroic. Anyone could have done that. But perhaps that's just the point. Sometimes a hero is the person who actually does what anyone could have done. And then, let me suggest that the whole community of Israel may be the hero, because they're the ones who participate in that battle. So one of the humbler lessons I'm going to suggest of this story is that victory depends on each one doing their part. A community then can become heroic when its members actually do what can be done, but often isn't. I'll say that again. A community can become a hero when its members actually do what can be done, but often isn't. And so often, all that needs to be done is just plain, ordinary stuff. And this important principle is illustrated by the story of James Jenkins. James was an old man who lived alone in the country. He wanted to dig his yearly veggie garden, but it was always hard work for him because the ground was so hard. His only son, James Jenkins III, who used to help him, was now in prison. So the old man wrote a letter to his son and sadly described his depressing predicament. The letter: "Dear son James, I'm feeling pretty bad because it looks like I won't be able to plant my veggie garden this year. I'm just getting too old to be digging up a rocky garden plot. If you were here, my troubles would be over. I know you would dig the plot for me." A few days later, he received a letter from his son. "Dear Daddy Jenkins, whatever you do, by all means, don't dig up that garden. That's where I buried the bodies. Love, your son James." Well, at 4 a.m. the next morning, FBI agents and local police arrived and dug up the entire area, but they didn't find any bodies. So they apologized to the old man and left. Well, that same day, the old man received another letter from his son. "Dear Daddy Jenkins, you can go ahead and plant the vegetables now. That's the best I could do under these circumstances. Love, your son, James." I did not come up with that story, but the gentleman who was up front and is now in the back sent it to me a number of years ago. So blame it on him. Anyhow, but that's all we need to do, the best we can under the circumstances, as the letter indicated. And that's the story of Hur. But there's one essential ingredient that makes all this work. And for this, we need to go back to our first stop on the journey, where I left you stranded on the shore. With the Egyptian cavalry behind them and the fierce sea in front of them, the Jews could only pray to God for help. But God surprisingly responds to Moses, "Why cry out to me? Speak to the Israelites and let them start going." Catch that? The message is clear. Demonstrate your commitment. Jump into the rushing waves. Only then will I help you. And so the verse says, "And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea." In other words, while that sea was still raging, so to speak. And then as soon as they went into the sea, it goes on to say they went in on dry land. Because God had then performed his miracle. And it says, "And the waters were for them as a wall to the right and to their left." We need to show the same kind of commitment. We, each of us, must be willing to step out or step in, whichever way it is, to act. The well-known author Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, The Tipping Point, retold a very haunting, familiar story from many decades ago. The story of Kitty Genovese, or maybe it's Visi. I'm not good at Italian. This is the young woman who was attacked on the street and stabbed to death in 1964, while 38 of her neighbors watched from their windows. Throughout the entire attack, which lasted over half an hour, none of the neighbors intervened or even called the police. The event was interpreted as a symbol of callous indifference, the callous indifference of city life, And it became a classic story regarding people's indifference to the plight of others. But Gladwell presents another interpretation developed by two Columbia University psychologists who did extensive studies to try to understand what had happened. And Gladwell says this: when people are in a group, responsibility for acting is diffused. They assume that someone else will make the call, or they assume that because no one else is acting, the apparent problem isn't really a problem. In the case of Kitty Genovese, the lesson is not that no one called despite the fact that 38 people heard her scream. It's that no one called because 38 people heard her scream. Ironically, had she been attacked on a lonely street with just one witness, she might have lived. Her neighbors failed her tragically, not from indifference, but from the assumption that someone else would take care of the problem. Sometimes, however, the hero is just the ordinary person who does not wait around for someone else to do what anyone could have done. There's an interesting statement that fits in well here. And for this, you need to go back, and I apologize at one level, but not at another. You'll hear why in a minute. To one of the final scenes of the Fellowship of the Ring. It's time for Frodo to journey on alone with the Ring of Power, to take it back to its source in that dark kingdom of Mordor, and there destroy it. And Frodo says this: I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. And so Gandalf replies, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you. So, who is the hero? The one who does what needs to be done with the time that's given to them. The one who does what needs to be done with the time that's given to them, even if someone else could do it. I forget which of the ancient rabbis said it. I think it's on the wall in Matt's office. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? That's the question we will need to answer this evening. Begin the answer in quiet and then follow through on it through the course of the week and weeks to come. The Elenu anticipates the end of the journey that we're on, the adventure we have with God as we walk with Him through the wilderness that He specifically planted for our lives. It's the anticipation that we started out with through Sephardi Kaddish, and it's the anticipation we now conclude with the Elenu, pages 102 to 107. And there's a key line in there: our calling is our task. That's the first part of responding to Him and saying to Him, I will be the one. Please rise as we respond on pages 102 to 107. And again, please remember, it's only for one line that we need to bow. And if you don't know which line that is, even though the asterisk is there, keep your eye on the cantor, on Jenny.
Aleinu l'shabach la'adon ha'kol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא
שמקלקנו כהם, וגואל עלינו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אין את מלכנו, את סגולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום, והשבותה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד.
It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, for He has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs, our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like Him. For He stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth.
Truly there is none like our Lord and King.
As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's greater Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled. The Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
You may be seated. Except for the dude who's strolling up front. They're in your hands.